सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति 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 हरि ओम. A very good morning to all my young friends, respected Vice Chancellor Sir, Ma'am Dean, and Sir Dr. Sanjeev, of Dean of Rashram School. It's really a happy occasion personally for me to come to Rishihood and meet all of you here. I have had the opportunity to know your Vice Chancellor, Sir, for a long time, but this is our first offline meeting. And I'm really happy to be in this new energetic university. And as Vice Chancellor Sir has introduced the theme of today's talk, all of you are postgraduate students? Undergrad? Okay, not a problem. So the presentation is little data packed. Don't worry about the numbers. I'll try to explain you, and I'll just take about, I won't rush through, but I'll take about 35-40 minutes. Okay, so you see what is happening. India, you all know India was under British rule, and we were fighting the British. Okay, it's not that our ancestors were not virile people. We were always fighting the British, and हम लोग क्या कर रहे थे, उनको नास्ता नाबूद कर रहे थे. एक जगह पे विद्रोह होता था, वो कुचल देते थे, फिर दूसरा जगह होता था. So they always had to move their army from one place to another place, and that is why they came with the railway system, that they could move their troops and obviously goods. Now there are some interesting data I will tell you. You might have heard of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He used to always tell that India has to be a knowledge society. India had been a knowledge society, but very few of us know of it. And why India has been a knowledge society, you see, there is something by Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda used to, even he had the courage to tell this on the face of the white colonizers in London. He said that when you people, your ancestors were groping in darkness, basically drawing cave pictures, our ancestors were holding aloft the torch of civilization. So we were doing that. We were building high rises. If you go to Tamil Nadu, where you have a lot of surviving ancient temples, if you look at the big temple at Tanjore, Brihadishwara at Tanjavur, you will be shocked. It's a monumental structure built 1,000 years ago, and for 1,000 years it is functional. I recently visited Puri Jagannath Mandir. It is 226 feet high. How did they achieve it? Without science and technology, without an established domain of architecture. And this would not have been developed just 1,000 years back. This was a continuous process, and 1,000 years back they achieved the pinnacle of it. And had India been on its own, this would have been a continued tradition. But unfortunately, that was not the case. But then very recently, you have had European historians of world economy. I'll name two people, Agnes Madison and Paul Byrock. Okay, so they have given you contours of world economy from the beginning of the common era to our present times. And here it's an established fact. These are all empirical facts, established facts. They are done with precise mathematical calculations, and there may be an error of 2%, not more than that. So what is it? 1757, you have Battle of Plassey. Aurangzeb is dead for 50 years. There is no central authority in India. At that point of time, India's share in global trade, we had always boasted of a blue water navy. So India was crisscrossing the world, and our share in global trade was more than 27%. During the same time, Britons, who were colonizing us or trying to colonize us and had occupied large chunks of India, become paramount powers in various places like Bengal, Bombay and Madras regions, their trade share was less than 2%. All along world's history, up to the 16th, 17th, sometimes up to the 18th century, India and China controlled more than 50% of world's GDP and manufacturing output, industrial output. So these were the facts. And today you have many people writing how the British looted us, how the British defamed us. One of them had written about, Shashi Tharoor had written about how much the British took away from us. But then there were nationalist historians like Ramesh Chandra Dutt, R.C. Dutt. They have written. Dadabhai Naroji had written a book, Un-British Rule, and how British rule made India, pushed India into poverty. We were not poor people. Okay, you look at the traveling accounts of foreigners who came to India from 11, 12, even earlier, 5th, 6th centuries to recent times. They always spoke of India. Two things they spoke. One is it's the most populous region in the world, so population was never a problem. We could feed everybody. Okay, and not just the people, we could take care of our cattle also. We could feed our animals. Only when people have enough to eat, they can feed their animals, otherwise not. So this was there, Godhan, Raksha and all that. And second thing was, people did not live in scarcity. Wealth was distributed. There's this incidence of a traveler quoting how things were in Vijayanagara Empire. And they say every household had jewelry, gold and diamonds. And gold and diamonds were a rare commodity in the Western civilization. They did not know much of it. Okay, and something interesting. Have you heard of Rabindra Tagore? All of you. So his family is very famous family. There is another collateral branch of the family. In Bengali, we call them Thakur. Okay, not the North Indian Thakur, which means Zamindar online. They were Brahmins. So their title was Thakur, and this collateral branch, some British traveler came and visited them, and he said, "My God, this branch has jewelry and diamonds and rubies, which even the Queen of England, that is Victoria, does not have." So this was the kind of wealth that even families in India boasted of. So we were fighting. 1857, we had what they call Sepoy Mutiny. Most of us call it today as the first war of independence. Okay, though it did not have a pan-Indian character, but almost the whole of North India rose in rebellion, and the sepoys were supported by common people like you and me. Otherwise, it would not have been possible. It was so heavy that Indians did not rise up for the next 50 years, and you can read from British records how British went villages after villages and hanged all the male population from the trees. Heavy repercussion, okay, untold misery. So one American historian has written about it, Will Durant, The Case for India. If you get a chance, you please read that book, Will Durant's The Case for India. And there, as soon as the book was published in early 1920s, the book was banned in India. Okay, after we became independent, our leaders did not perhaps want us to read this book. So Mohandas Pai, one of the co-founders of Infosys, his daughter was studying abroad, sent him a copy of the book. He, through private endeavor, he published the book. Now it is available in print in India. Okay, you should read the book, and you will see how an American historian, Will Durant, he felt and what was needed. The book has 3 chapters. The Case for India, The Case for Britain, and there's a chapter on Gandhi where he equates Gandhi to Buddha. It's about 190 odd pages. You can finish it in a day or two. Now, when these things were happening, so the rise of nationalism during the late 19th and early 20th century, it was noticed that large sections of Indian society had little or no participation in the modern education system. From decadal census returns, we do census once in 10 years. The first census in India was done in 1871. Okay, so from this census records, when the picture became very clear that a large number of communities had a very low percentage of literates and even lower percentage of those who were literates in English. Now, why I say English? Because in those times, English became an absolute prerequisite. Now, you can't come here and study your undergrad program in Rishihood if you have not cleared your +2. you can't come. So for a government job, English became a prerequisite for any government or professional careers. In those days, English became a prerequisite, and it was very necessary. But I will show you in data that Indians did not have that literacy that they were required to have in English. And the British administrators, scholars, and some of our Indian people also attributed all this to the low status, social, economic, as well as educational, which these communities, as Sir pointed out, allegedly had in traditional Indian society for millennia. So 2-3 things I will say, what the national leaders were saying. Swami Vivekananda, towards the end of the 19th century, he commented that when a child goes to the school, the first thing he learns is his father is an idiot, his father an idiot, his grandfather a lunatic, his teachers hypocrites, and all his sacred books as bunch of lies. So your Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas are all mythologies, they are not itihasas. Just because the West has a different pedagogy of writing and talking and organizing history, and the Indian model does not fit. So, it's very easy for the Britishers to negate Kalidasa in one stroke. You have all heard of Kalidasa. He has written beautiful romantic poems. Okay? Kaschita Kanta Viraha Guruna Swadhikara Pramatya talks about a young girl who languishes because she is away from her beloved in Meghadutam. Then there is Abhigyana Shakuntalam, okay, where the story is from the corpus of Mahabharata. So Kalidasa was negated because he is no dramatist, nothing, because his pieces do not subscribe to the Aristotelian view, okay, the unities, the 3 unities. So these were there. Then there were others, there's Ananda Kumar Swami, Sri Aurobindo, Rabindra. They were all saying us that we are cut from our roots, civilizational roots, by a mercenary education. So we need to know, when we were on our own, we were functioning, before the British could tamper us, how was our thing organized. So anyway, I'm not going into it, we'll go. So this, now you see, however, some of our leaders at the helm of the national movement clearly expressed a differing view. Mahatma Gandhi was the foremost and the most articulate amongst them. In a speech made at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, popularly known as Chatham House, in London on October 20th, 1931, this time Gandhi was on a visit to England to attend the second roundtable conference. This was the only time Gandhiji travelled outside India. He came in 1915, he was assassinated in 48. He travelled only once outside India, but all other leaders, whether it is Bose or Nehru or Ambedkar, they travelled across. Gandhiji firmly believed that all the remedies to India's ills should be found within the shores of India. We don't have to look outside of India. So Gandhiji Gandhi in this speech, long speech, Future of India, he talked about his vision of education for an independent India. He asserted that the literacy levels which prevailed in India 50 or 100 years ago were better than what was prevailing then under the British system of education. He drew his audience's attention to the widespread indigenous system of education which was functioning even after the onset of the British rule in the early decades of the 19th century. Referring to this indigenous system of education as the beautiful tree, that's been the part of my topic today, and also the title of Dharampalji's book, which I'll come shortly. So Gandhiji said that the British uprooted this system and left the tree to wither away. And he said, our state, Gandhiji claimed, would revive the old village schoolmaster and dot every village with a school for both boys and girls. Not only for boys and girls. So this is what Gandhiji says. I say without fear of my figures being challenged successfully that India today is more illiterate than it was 50 or 100 years ago, and so is Burma, because the British administrators, when they came to India, instead of taking hold of things as they were, began to root them out. They scratched the soil and began to look at the root and left the root like that, and the beautiful tree perished. The village schools were not good enough for the British administrator, because the village school did not have a building, they did not have this kind of a classroom, paraphernalia, chairs, tables and all that. So the British administrator came out with his program. Every school must have so much paraphernalia, building and so forth. Well, there were no such schools in India like that. So there were statistics left by a British administrator which show that in places where they have carried out a survey, ancient schools have gone by the board because there was no recognition for these schools. And the schools established after the European pattern were too expensive for the local people, and therefore they could not possibly overtake the thing. So this is what Gandhiji says, that this very poor country of mine is ill able to sustain such an expensive method of education. Our state should revive the old village schoolmaster and dot every village with a school, both for boys and girls. Now, I just like to share an information with you. This is Gandhiji speaking in 1931. 150 years before that, you have one of the leading colonial Indologists, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Sir William Jones. I just like to share an information with you. This is Gandhiji speaking in 1931. 150 years before that, you have one of the leading colonial Indologists, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Sir William Jones. And he went to, have you heard the name of Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Anyone heard the name? No. Nobody from, I think, ma'am, you could have heard. No, not from the northeast. He is quite famous in Manipur and Assam and these regions. He is quite, so he was during the Bhakti movement, he was one of the leaders of the Bhakti movement. He came from a very famous town in South Bengal, a city rather, Navadvip. And Navadvip was the birthplace of a very sophisticated branch of philosophy called Navyanaya, New Logic, which required a lot of mathematics. If you had to play with logic, you had to be a mathematician. So William Jones visits Navadvip, and in his diary he writes, I have come to this university town of Nadia, where I see 1,500 scholars, 1,500 teachers like us, and 5,000 pupils like you, all studying gratuitously. Nobody pays. So every scholar hosts 3 or 5 students at his home, and then they teach him. And this is higher education. And then every residence of a scholar is a college, and the students have come from all over India. Their fooding, clothing, lodging is all taken care of by the scholar's family. This is how Indian education was organized. And see, there was no examination like that, semester exam, trimester exam and all that. Some people could, those who were quick learners, they could finish the curriculum in 3, 4, 5 years and go. Others who required more time could stay for 8, 10, 12 years also. And the end of it, when the teacher and the student both were satisfied, no degree certificate was given. Okay? So you know the society accepted it. So as late as 19th century, there was this astronomer, mathematician in Orissa. His name was Chandrasekhar Samanta, very famous. He could predict eclipses correctly. Now he did not have a telescope, he did not have his observatory and all that, but he could predict things by watching and by doing his calculations. Every time he predicted an eclipse correctly, the king, the local king, would order for an elephant. He will be put on the elephant and taken ceremoniously in a procession all around. Okay. So this is our way of, those days, instead of giving him a Padma Shri or Padma Vibhushan, calling him to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, this was the way the society honored a scholar. So Indians had all these things. We do not know. Anyway, we will move further. So what Gandhiji's statement did was, it challenged the very basis of the so-called civilizing mission of British rule in India. Okay, he squarely laid the blame for the prevalence of illiteracy amongst the Indian masses to the policies of the British rule. Now, immediately after this, there was a lot of challenge to what Gandhiji said. Because of paucity of time, I am not going into it. We are coming into now to a person, Dharampalji. Fortunately, we are celebrating his centenary year this year. And Dharampalji was born in 1922. He lived till 2006. He passed away in Gandhiji's ashram in Sevagram. So, Dharampalji talks about this, puts a detailed and rigorous substantiation of Gandhiji's pronouncement on the nature and extent of indigenous education system in India in the early 19th century. And the name of the book is The Beautiful Tree, Indigenous Education in the 18th Century. So, it's been 40 years since the publication of this seminal work. And what is so special about this book is, Dharampalji in this book has reproduced all the available original documents pertaining to a detailed survey of the indigenous system of education that was conducted in the Madras Presidency during 1820-25. Okay, so we are going back 200 years. Now, what did this book achieve? This book brought to light for the first time the crucial fact that in most districts of Madras Presidency, the overwhelming majority of the students, often 70% or more, hailed from non-Vija communities. You know, the Hindu society is divided into 4 major groups, social groups. So there is a shloka in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna tells Arjuna, Chatur Varnam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. I have divided the society in 4 social groupings according to their profession and qualities, gunas. So here the 4 groupings are the Brahmanas, the Shudras, the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas. Traditionally, the Vaishyas are the largest community. Traditionally speaking, the Vaishyas are the largest community. They are followed by the Shudras, they are followed by the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins. Okay. In some regions there are more number of Brahmins, less number of Kshatriyas, some places it is other. But overall, the Vaishyas are the largest community and they number about 65% of the population are Vaishyas. And what did the Vaishyas do? They engaged in Krishi, Vanijya, Goraksha, agriculture, animal industry, trade, commerce, economic activities were there. What did the Kshatriyas do? They generally engaged in, administration, military, policing activities. Like they worked with the state. The Raja was the first Kshatriya, Rajanya. And the Shudras were kind of they were professionals who supported the other 3 communities, and the Brahmanas engaged in education, they engaged in priesthood, they engaged in advisory roles and all that. So traditionally speaking, if you look at the Vedas, no community was perched against the other. It was not a ladder system, somebody at the top and somebody at the low. But some due to invasions after invasions, and the Indian society lost its vitality, functionality, things changed. So that is another debate. We are not going. Now, you see, 70% from non-Vija communities, that is the Shudras and what are termed as the other castes in the reports. Today, the other castes would mean the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes largely. And Dharampalji also highlighted the fact that the indigenous system of education in Madras Presidency in 1825 was more widespread and vibrant than the nascent system of public education that was emerging in England towards the end of the 18th century. Now, why was this survey necessitated? See, during 1820-35, there was a debate going on in London, in the House of Commons precisely, that how do we civilize Indians? We were uncivilized, okay? We had no culinary tradition, no heritage, no books worth the name, no philosophers, nothing. The light of civilization had to be brought. We had to be instructed. So this debate was going on. There were two popular groups in this debate. One was called the Anglicist, then the other was called the Orientalist. Okay, the Orientalists wanted to use some of the Indian, they wanted to educate the Indians in the Western mode only, but using Indian languages. The Anglicists said no, Indian languages are incompetent. You have to use English alone. So there were these provincial governments at that time. There were three provincial governments. One was Madras, one was at Bengal, another was at Bombay. They were called the presidencies. Bombay Presidency, Bengal Presidency, Madras Presidency. So they were instructed to carry out detailed surveys of indigenous education system that were prevalent at that time in their provinces. So the survey was done in some selected districts of Bombay Presidency. First it was done in 1824-25 and then it was done again in 1828-29. On instruction of Governor General Lord William Bentinck, William Adam, a friend of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, you must have heard his name, no? Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So he was a friend of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He was a member of the Unitary Church and all that. He conducted a survey of indigenous education in 5 districts of Bengal Presidency: Birbhum, Bardwan, South Bihar. That time Bengal Presidency meant a large area. The whole of West Bengal today, Bangladesh region, parts of Assam, Tripura, whole of Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, parts of Orissa. So this is the land, huge. Okay, so they did 5 districts, Tirhut and parts of Murshidabad. Murshidabad was the capital region of Bengal in pre-British time. Adam also personally carried out a detailed survey of the area under the Thana of NATO. Thana means a police station. Each police station has a notified area. So this NATO in Rajshahi district, it is presently in Bangladesh region. The survey in Madras Presidency was perhaps the most detailed and was conducted during 1822-25. You might be wondering why it is taking such a long time to do these surveys. Because the regions were not peaceful. Every district was fighting the British. And the British was always on the move. So it was very difficult to conduct the surveys. I'll give you one example. You know how Indians fought the British at various levels. In 1809, 1810, 1811, this period, the British decided to introduce house tax, which was never there before in the Indian scenario. And the people revolted. Somewhere there was armed revolution, somewhere there was what is called non-cooperation, satyagraha. So the day the British came to do survey in the city of Benares, very famous, some of you might have visited. So the people of Benares, the shopkeepers, everybody padlocked their homes and shops and they vacated the city. There was nobody in the city. They vacated the city, they went to the Gangetic plains, they grouped by communities and they stayed there. They stayed there for months together. The British got their troops, the British got their guns, machine guns and all that. They did not move. They were not afraid. They stayed there like a Kumbh Mela, mini Kumbh Mela, eating, staying there. Then the British had to negotiate with the Maharaja of Benares. The Maharaja came, negotiation was done, he pleaded with his people and came back. The argument on the part of the people were, look, it's a pilgrim city. People are coming here, large numbers, they are staying here. If you tax us, do you tax us on the air we breathe? The house is given by the gods. How can you tax it? And it is not my house. I will not be taking it away. It will be here. So this concept, the British did not understand. Why the British did not understand? I'll show you very shortly one data. You see, when the British did the first census in Great Britain, England and Wales in 1851, they divided the entire population into 2 groups. Okay, upper and middle classes, bade log, or laboring classes. So the upper and middle class was only 12% of the total population. Laboring classes were 88%. You mean to tell us that they will bring the light of civilization and tell us they were a highly class-based society, rigorously class-based. Okay. There was this king, Saudi Arab, Fahd, who had once remarked that only two royal dynasties will survive. One is the royal dynasty of the House of Cards, and there is the royal dynasty of England. These two will survive, others will not survive. I'm just telling you. So they are a very class-based, rigorously class-based society. And that's not the end of the story. 12% of this upper and middle classes owned whole of Britain. 88% did not own any property. They were serfs, tenants. Okay? So we come to this. There is a communication, official communication dated 5th of July 1822. This goes from the governor's office in Madras Presidency to all the district collectors of Madras. Now Madras Presidency is also a huge region. Just imagine the map of India. Lower part of Orissa, you have a district bordering Andhra Pradesh called Ganjam. So Madras Presidency starts from Ganjam, covers the whole of traditional Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, large parts of Karnataka, and whole of Tamil Nadu, and the northern region of Kerala, the Malabar region of Kerala. The southern region of Kerala was native states, Travancore, Kollam and all that. So the information sought was in tabular form. It should include the total population, numbers of schools and colleges in districts. The collectors were also asked to give the number of boys and girls studying in these schools and colleges under each of the following community heads. So the community heads are listed here. Brahmin scholars or Kshatriya students, Vaishya students, Shudra students, the scholars from all other castes. This I discussed some time back, that this would recommend to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes today. Grand total Hindus, Muslim scholars, grand total Hindus and Muslim students, and total population. So now there is no clear specification as to what was meant by this category, all other castes. So perhaps they are the SCs and STs, and the detailed collectors kept on sending the reports. And on 21st February 1825, the Board of Revenues, that's the government thing, they sent it to the Chief Secretary at the Fort St. George. This is today still the seat of the government in Tamil Nadu. And then this goes to Thomas Munro, the governor of Madras Presidency, and gets inducted as part of the proceedings in the House of Commons papers. You see, it's volume 9, 1831-32 debates. But the district-wise data on the community profile was not published till Dharampalji came up with his book in 1983. So now we come to the minutes of Governor General Thomas Munro. So before we go to the minutes, I'll just tell you how we arrive at this statistics. Boys of school going age. What is the age group? 5 to 10 years. Okay. My father got admitted in class in the 3rd standard, and his elder brother got admitted in the 6th standard in schools. Okay. But I think they were far more educated than what I am today. In various sense. It's not about a PhD degree or all that, but they had more sense of the society, the community they lived in, and the traditions than I can ever have. Anyway, so this 5 to 10 years is the age group. So this is calculated as 1/18th of the total population. The total population will have various age groups. So 5 to 10 age group is 1/9th of the total population. So if you take 50% of the total population as boys and 50% of girls, then boys will be 1/18th and girls will be another 1/18th. Just keep this in your background as I show you the thing. So Munro says, if we reckon the male population between the ages of 5 to 10, this is 1/9, and he makes this observation. I am, however, inclined to estimate the portion of male population who receive school education to be nearer to 1/3 than 1/4 of the whole, because we have no returns from the provinces of the numbers taught at home. In Madras, the number taught at home is about 5 times greater than that taught in schools. Munro completely ignores, because Munro comes from a background. See, he is born in Scotland, and in Scotland there is no school network like that. England definitely has a very high tradition of university systems. Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, London. Okay, but this entire system was restricted to a very select elite. The children of the laboring classes did not have access there. They were meant for the aristocrats and royalty. Now, the data. Okay, I have grouped the districts according to the dialect the people there spoke. So you have the Oriya speaking district, which is speaking region, large region, Kannada speaking region, Malayalam and Tamil region. So boys in age group we have calculated, number of schools we have calculated, and boys studying in those schools we have calculated. This is as per the survey data. You see in this region you have 11,575 schools and about 1,53,000 students studying in these schools. And if you take the boys in the age group 5 to 10 years, that's 7,13,000, then you see about 21.5% of the boys of school going age are in the school system in these indigenous schools. We are talking of a time when Madras Presidency was under great stress. It was suffering from British rule for last 50 years. No resources were available at the local level. Still the local society was able to support this school system. Now, this is more interesting. The community-wise breakup of the students as per the language division. Okay, so just I will briefly, before going this, I will tell you the Oriya speaking region of Madras Presidency comprised of Ganjam district, Malayalam speaking region comprised of the Lone district of Malabar, then Vishakhapatnam, Rajamundri, Machilipatnam, Guntur, Nellore and Kadapa were the Telugu speaking region, Bellary and Srirangapatnam, Kannada, North Arcot, South Arcot, Chengalpat, Tanjavur, Tiruchirappalli, Madurai, Tirunelveli, Coimbatore, Salem, Madras, Tamil speaking regions, whole of Tamil Nadu. Now, here you see the thing is, if you look at the presidency total, then you will see what we are trying to tell. You see that of the total students studying in the school, 7% were Muslims, Hindus were 93%. Amongst the Hindus, about 20% were Brahmins. There were no Kshatriyas like that. About 9% Vaishyas. The Shudras were 50% and other castes were 15%. So Shudras and the other castes, non-Dvijas, here in the presidency, yes, in the Hindus only, they are 65% of the school going student population or under instruction students in Madras Presidency. They could not find the Kshatriyas properly in Madras Presidency. It is, if you look at the census from 1871 onwards, then you will see the British administrators are playing with the castes and communities. Sometimes they are bringing one community and the other caste grouping, they are removing it. So every census is kind of different. So they did not understand. And they would consult one Brahmin scholar about the Kshatriyas. That should not be. You have to go to the Kshatriyas. And it's like today you see somebody from Guwahati sitting in New Delhi dictating what the students of Ramanathapuram in Tamil Nadu would learn. The students of Ramanathapuram in Tamil Nadu should learn what they want to learn.
And this is unimaginable because this belt was so huge. And you can't imagine belt, this huge belt without defense and security and policing.
And you see, the Tamil speaking region, now Tamil Nadu has a history of the backward classes movement and all that, and this becomes very interesting. The Tamil Nadu region, where there the Shudras and other castes formed 75% of the students in the schools, indigenous. This is something very interesting. And the Brahmins and the Vaishyas were about 16%. So this is an astounding number.
Yeah.
Now, this does not give you the whole picture. We will come to L.G.K. Murray. He was one of those enlightened British officials, collectors, who thought, I will do a little more work. हमें पूछा नहीं गया है. Teacher has not told me, but I'll give you footnotes and references. And the teacher feels happy. So Munro did not feel happy with what he had said. So he gave detailed, see, there is a parallel system of children being educated at home, apart from school. Rabindra Tagore was educated at home. Okay, my grandmother was educated at home, but she could speak English, recite English poems. She was born in 1917. Okay, she could recite English poems and sign her name in English and all that, but she was educated at home. So this L.G.K. Murray gives detailed information on the number of boys who were instructed at home, and according to Murray, there were 5,500 odd boys studying in 322 schools, whereas 26,000 boys were instructed at homes. Okay, so 5 times more, and this is the table that Murray gives us. Okay. This is also something extremely interesting. Okay. So, but Munro is trained to downplay this information. That is the colonial training, that you do not acknowledge. How do I come from, say, Sister Nivedita University, and I go to another university, and how can I say that do universities know the colonial agenda, mine is best and yours is not good? There cannot be any equality. So that kind of a thing. He is not able to appreciate the fact that in India they can have such a widespread system of education. And he says this is nearer to 1/3 than 1/4, whereas it should have been nearly 2/3. 65% of the boys, if you consider Madras district collector's report, then 65% of the boys of school going age were under instruction, not 1/3, not 3%. Okay. Now, what was the duration of schooling in various districts of Madras Presidency? It was about 5 to 8 years. So I have given you some data: Rajmandri, Masulipatnam, Kadappa, Nellore, Bellary, Arcot, Tanjavur, Tiruchirappalli, Madurai, Coimbatore, Salem and Madras. So this is again from Dharampalji, beautiful tree. And institutions of higher learning, colleges. Now, colleges were not like Rishihood University. Colleges were residences of an individual scholar, where people came and studied. So these are the lists of colleges. You had 1,094 colleges with 5,431 students studying. Now this is also equal to, I just quoted William Jones's observation to you. William Jones also says that there were 1,500 scholars and 5,000 odd pupils studying. Similar set of arrangement in Bengal and Madras Presidency at a gap of about 30-40 years. So I am only trying to point out the system is pan-India. Now, higher learning under private tutors in Malabar. Okay, there are some figures in red. Please look at them. Who is studying what? Theology and law. Brahmin community. Astronomy. 78 Brahmins, 23 Vaishyas, 195 Shudras, 510 people from other castes. They are doing Jyotir Shastra, not astrology, astronomy. And Kerala has a high tradition of mathematics and astronomy. I mentioned yesterday that when 200 years before Sir Isaac Newton is called the father of calculus. 200 years before, unknown mathematicians in obscure coastal villages of Kerala were working with infinitesimal calculus, and that too in their own language, Malayalam. Some of these books have been published today. So then medicine again is a forte of the non-Brijas. Medicine and astronomy, completely forte of non-Brijas. Okay, so this is very interesting data. You see, I am quoting Encyclopedia Britannica. I am not saying what I want to say, no rhetoric. I am quoting Encyclopedia Britannica 1855. This is an entry on popular education in England and Wales. And this is the opening sentence. Popular education in England is almost entirely the creation of the present century. Before 1801, the total number of public and private schools was only 3,363. In 1851, they were 44,000 odd. England had made substantial progress in 50 years, no doubt, but before 1801, England had nothing. We had. So, popular education in England and Wales, tabulated for you, and I have given you the source, Dharampal and Albert. Who is Albert? Prince Albert, the Prince Consort, husband of Queen Victoria. Would you believe him or not? So, this is here, the data. And you see the number of schools are tabulated here. The total population is given. And, but again, the number of schools, you see it's almost 70,000 and students studying are 45 lakhs in 1851. They are studying, but are they becoming literate? This is what Prince Albert says in 1857, the year we had Sepoy Mutiny in India. See what he says. In 1801, there were in England and Wales of public schools 2876, of private schools 487, the same encyclopedia data. But then he says, at the same time, an analysis of the scholars with reference to the length of time allowed for their school tuition shows that 42% of them have been at school for less than 1 year, 22% during 1 year, 15% during 2 years, 9% during 3 years, 5% during 4 years, and 4% during 5 years. So only 4% of this huge number is actually becoming literate. I leave it to you to judge what the results of such an education can be. 1851, England and Wales. Now this is something I was telling you. Total population of England and Wales. Okay, middle and upper classes population and laboring classes population. This is this 12%, 88% divide. You see, of the upper and middle classes population, both in 1833 and 1851, all students of 3 to 12 years they have taken here, they're in the school system. 100%, 100%. Okay, but of the laboring classes population, only 30% is there in 1833. And in 1851 also it is less than 50%. But where were the laboring classes students studying? They were studying in the Sunday schools. They were not studying in regular schools because every day they had to go to work. They had to clean the chimney. They had to work in the factory. Okay, so Sundays they went to the church. After the church prayer, they had the schooling. And what was the schooling? They were given moral education, religious education. They don't do this. Don't do this. Don't learn numbers. Numbers is the handiwork of devil. Okay, so this was the kind of education that they got. So I was wrong. It is 85% and 15%, not 88 and 12, 85% and 15%. Okay. Now I showed you the 1822 data, sir. This is what I was referring to yesterday. The indigenous schools survived in Madras Presidency till 1882. You see, you had in 1855, we saw the number was 11,500 in 1822-25. It has grown by about 1,000 indigenous schools, 12,498. The number of students have also grown. In the next 30 years, it has become from 1,50,000 to 1,61,000. Okay, the departmental schools were only 83. This is the government schools, and
They would get the aid from the government.
unaided. The government schools are run by the governments, aided schools. And in 1871, the status quo remains more or less the same, but the number of students in the department schools have gone up. And it is only in 81, 82, you see, that this indigenous schools here become aided. They are brought in the government system. It is only when that is being done, the number of students studying in the government schools go up on a rise. Okay? So this is from the report of the Provincial Committee, Madras Provincial Committee to the Education Commission of India in 1882. They call these schools, you see, it appears from these two statements that 8,436 schools of an indigenous character with about 1,85,000 students have been brought into connection with the department. The great increase in the number of schools connected with the Department of Education has been due mainly to the gradual absorption of such indigenous schools. So our society, in spite of various odds, could keep these schools intact. So I'll quickly take 5 minutes, rush through the statistics. This is the status of community participation in school education from 1861 onwards. I'll show you data up to 1935. In 1861, you see there are no SCs, STs in the government system. Nobody. Slowly the number comes. 1879, 78, they are just less than 1% of the total students studying. Okay. So 84, 85, they're about the Hindus are here.
Nomenclature was not used at that time. SC, STs, did they use the same nomenclature?
Scheduled castes were used, scheduled tribes were used, were being used. So this is the 1921-22 picture. It's only during 1934-35. You see, there's something very, the native Christians, they were absolutely not present in 1822-25. The conversion has started and they are 100%. So if you look then you will see there is a special emphasis on them. And here you see the SC/ST data is not there for 1884-85. There were nobody here. But the picture changes. 1819, you have 76% Brahmins, Vaishyas and Shudras are 25, and SCs, STs are around 22. So this goes on, and it's only in 1934-35 that you have a picture like this. But then there is gross, you see the dropout rates were 80%. The dropout rates were 80%. Okay, so this does not give us a complete picture on the literacy. So,
What would be the reason? What would be the reason of such a view?
So, ma'am, one thing was the average life expectancy was of an Indian male was less than 30%. Can you imagine? The average life expectancy of an Indian male was less than 30% in the whole of the British period. Okay. So if you look at the census data, then you will see this is male literacy I have plotted. So male literacy is, even in 1951, when you look at the school enrollment figure of 1934-35 and you look at the 1951 male literacy figure, then it will give you a proper picture. 1951 it is less than 30%. 1941 it is 22%. Even if 100% are studying in schools, the literacy is this. So male literacy by religion in Madras Presidency, you have the Hindus, Muslims and Christians. So the Christians are a lot more, and you have, see, I have here, it may not be of interest to you, but here I have plotted from the census data community wise. Okay, the Brahmins and various communities you will see. In 1921 I have used this, and here you see the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. The scheduled tribes are less than 0.5% male literacy, and the scheduled castes are less than I think 3%. Okay, that is the solid state of affair. So we have traced here the community profile of boys in primary schools in Madras Presidency during 1825 1935. 1825 survey data shows that the indigenous education was widespread system of schools for the education mostly of boys, and about 21.5% of the boys of school going age were educated in the schools. Noting that a large number of students were being instructed at home, Governor Thomas Munro, he estimates that this is about 33% of the boys of school going age who were undergoing instruction either in the schools or at home. But on available data, you see can be easily calculated, plotted to 65%. The survey also showed that the overwhelming majority of the boys undergoing instruction in the schools hailed from non-Vija communities. In the Presidency as a whole, 50% of the students were Shudras and 15% were from other communities, which are largely SC/STs today. The share of the non-Vijas was as high as 75% in the Tamil Presidency. So from the annual reports of the Department of Public Instruction, please note the name, it's not education, it's instruction. You had to be instructed what to do. Okay, so that by the end of the turn of the century, only 27% of the boys of the school going age were studying in primary schools, and this enrollment ratio goes up to 44% in 2021 and 63% in 34-35. But since the dropout rate in the 1920s is more than 80%, it's the literacy figures which gives you the correct thing. So Census of India records that the literacy in the Presidency of Madras was 22%, and this will be a better indicator. And so Gandhiji was true, and Dharampalji has given us the data, which I have my part in this presentation is I have put in the data from the decadal census records and tried to show how the Indians continued to suffer in the British rule. And you see, okay, so I think the situation persisted till the end of the British rule, and it is still one of the major issues that is being attended to by all of us in an independent India. Thank you.
I just had a point. This was very strange, but then in one of the slides I noticed that Vaishyas would study only astronomy. So I was trying to figure out why did they study only astronomy? Like they were more into economics and business and financial stuff. But how come they studied only astronomy?
That would be very difficult for me to give an answer because definitely. But you see, at certain places there were communities. One community would have a grasp of one subject. This was so there is something very interesting observation recorded by William Adam. He says there were in the schools in Bengal there were Chandala teachers. Chandalas as outcast. Okay, now if you consider Mahadeva Shiva as a Chandala, you have no problem. Okay, but Chandalas are who deal with dead bodies, animal skins, work in the crematorium and all that. But there were teachers of such communities in the schools also, and the schools were functioning.
Yeah, there was no discrimination of this kind.